They say every drummer hides a storm behind the rhythm. For Aynsley Dunbar, that storm never stopped. Before he became the man who played with Zapper, Bowie, Lou Reed, and Journey, he was a boy in Liverpool who could turn anger into tempo. Born in 1946, raised in a grey house with more silence than comfort. He learned early that noise was the only way to feel alive. Neighbours complained. His mother just sighed. The boy didn't talk much, he played. By 11 he'd broken his first snare. By 17 he was playing smoky jazz clubs, where men twice his age watched him with something between envy and fear. He was small, restless, dangerous, the kind of kid who'd fight you for a beat. The 60s in Liverpool were electric. Every bar had a band. Every dream smelled of beer and sweat. But Aynsley wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing speed, precision, perfection. He wanted to control the chaos that had built his childhood. Then came 1966, the rumour year. Jimi Hendrix had arrived in London, hunting for a drummer who could keep up with Hellfire. Two names on the table, Mitch Mitchell and Aynsley Dunbar. They flipped a coin. Heads, Mitchell. Tails, Dunbar. History landed on heads. The coin robbed Aynsley of immortality and gave him a grudge that would fuel a career. He'd later say, I didn't lose to Hendrix. I lost to luck. But luck has a cruel sense of humour. Instead of fame, Dunbar found Frank Zapper, a mad scientist who needed a drummer that could think in 13/8 and bleed in time. Frank didn't hire him, he tested him. Rumour says Zapper made him play a 10-minute solo in front of the band without stopping. When Aynsley finished, Zapper smirked and said, good. Now do it backwards. He parsed. Working with Zapper wasn't a job, it was a nervous breakdown disguised as genius. Dunbar was the heartbeat of organised madness, driving Chunger's Revenge and 200 Motels with surgical rage. But every session cut deeper into his sanity. Frank was a control freak. Aynsley was a free animal. The clashes were legendary, drumsticks flying, words sharper than cymbals. He was a genius, Aynsley would admit later, but he wanted robots. I bleed too much for that. By the mid-70s, the boy from Liverpool was a rock nomad. He played for Bowie, Lou Reed, Jeff Beck, Journey, bands that hired him for his power and fired him for his temper. Managers called him the drummer you can't own. He smiled, because that was exactly the point. But every rebel pays rent to loneliness. Between tours, Aynsley drank alone in Los Angeles bars, wondering if the coin that cost him Hendrix had also cursed him to play for everyone but himself. He had money, women, and drum sets in 3 countries, but no home. And under the spotlights, his hands trembled not from speed, but from fear of stopping. Because for Aynsley Dunbar, stillness was the one rhythm he never learned. By 1973, the industry was changing. Glam rock was louder, the money was filthy, and ego was the new religion. Aynsley Dunbar, the British prodigy who once challenged Frank Zapper to a tempo duel, was now the drummer everyone wanted, and no one could handle. He moved from project to project like a ghost with calloused hands. Jeff Beck, Lou Reed, David Bowie. Every studio door opened with praise and closed with a fight. He was too intense, too precise, too alive. Lou Reed called him a beautiful nightmare. Bowie called him a machine that feels. Both were right. The sessions for Berlin were hell disguised as art. The album's theme was decay, and Aynsley fit perfectly. He was living his own collapse. He'd sleep 3 hours a night, chain smoke between takes, then hit the drums like he was trying to kill silence itself. Engineer Bob Ezrin would later say, or I never saw a man play with so much rage and so much precision at the same time. But when the record was done, Reed barely thanked him. Dunbar walked out of the studio without a word, and never listened to the album again. He called it the sound of a suicide note with a beat. Then came Bowie. Pin-ups. Diamond dogs. Genius met genius, and neither could stand the mirror. The sessions were volatile. Bowie wanted drama, Aynsley wanted truth. He'd slam a fill too hard, Bowie would turn cold and say, "Are you stealing the spotlight?" Aynsley would reply, "He then play louder." There were rumours of chairs thrown, bottles smashed, and an incident in Paris where Bowie walked off set mid-take. But later, Bowie sent him a note. "You played like you meant it. Most don't." He kept that note in his wallet for years. By the late 70s he joined Journey, a band on the edge of becoming arena royalty. For a while, it felt like stability. Big stages, steady checks, fans chanting his name. But the bigger Journey got, the smaller he felt. He was a blues soldier in a pop machine. One night in San Francisco, after an argument over a simplified drum part, he snapped. He threw his sticks across the stage and walked off mid-song. The crowd cheered. They thought it was part of the show. The next day he was out. No press release, no goodbye. Just a plane ticket home and a new drummer. He'd been fired before, but this one hurt. Because for once, he believed he belonged. Back in Los Angeles, he checked into a hotel under a fake name. For weeks, he barely left the room. Room service, whiskey, silence. Friends said he was a burnt out. He called it haunted. "I was always the drummer for somebody else's dream," he told a magazine later. "I forgot what mine was. It should have been the end." But in music, the ones who burn the brightest rarely fade, they just go underground. And Aynsley was about to descend into his darkest chapter yet. The one where he'd lose everything that still mattered. By 1980 the roar was gone. No more tour buses, no more flashbulbs. Aynsley Dunbar, the man who'd played with gods, sat in a rented Los Angeles apartment surrounded by silent drums. The phone stopped ringing. The industry that once begged for his timing now wanted younger faces, cleaner tempers, easier stories. He'd spent 15 years behind the greatest names in rock. Now he couldn't even get a callback for a session. For the first time, he felt something scarier than failure: stillness. He tried to fill it with noise, small gigs, late bars, strangers who called themselves fans but left before morning. Whiskey was cheaper than therapy. Cocaine was easier than sleep. By his own account, he had drummed through the hangovers until the hangovers started drumming back. He was 35 and already looked older than his heroes who died younger. Then came the call no parent should ever get. His son, 10 years old, had died in a freak accident. The details were never public, and Aynsley never wanted them to be. What mattered was the silence that followed. He disappeared from interviews. Stopped playing for months. Friends found him one night at his kit, not playing, just sitting, head down, sticks on the floor. The drums didn't answer back anymore, he said quietly years later. They used to talk to me. After he died, all I heard was echo. The funeral was private, somewhere in California. No cameras, no bandmates, just a few old friends from the Zapper days. Someone said he refused to let anyone else carry the coffin. Another said he whispered to it, "I'll keep the time for you." After that, Aynsley moved again, this time north, away from the industry. He lived near San Jose, teaching lessons, fixing kits for kids who didn't know they were being taught by a legend. No one recognized him at first. The beard was longer, the eyes quieter, the anger cooled into melancholy. He wasn't trying to rebuild a career anymore. He was trying to survive a heart that beat like a snare hit, sharp, relentless, alone. One student later recalled, "He never yelled. He'd just tap his chest and say, 'Feel it here first. The sticks come later.'" That was the new Aynsley, softer, slower, but not broken. The world thought he'd retired. In truth, he was relearning how to exist without applause. In the mid-90s he began to reappear. Studio credits again, small tours, old friends calling him back. But something in him had changed permanently. He no longer played to impress. He played to breathe. He once told a journalist, "When you lose a child, time stops being measured in years. It's measured in how long you can keep the beat before breaking." The world never heard that version of him, the grieving father behind the drum legend. But those who did said he played quieter now, as if every cymbal crash was a prayer. And sometimes, when the crowd went wild, he'd close his eyes, lift his head to the lights, and whisper the same words he'd said at the coffin. "I'm keeping time for you." By the late 90s, the legend everyone forgot was quietly rebuilding. No more record label chaos, no egos screaming in the booth. Just a man, a kit, and a stubborn rhythm that refused to die. Aynsley Dunbar had been to the edge of madness and grief, and somehow, rhythm had waited for him. He started showing up again in the credits: UFO, Whitesnake, Eric Burdon, Sammy Hagar. People in the studio whispered, "He still has it." But what they didn't see was the ritual before every session. He'd sit for a full minute in silence, eyes closed, counting his breath. Timing, he told one engineer, isn't about tempo. It's about when your soul catches up. In 2000 he formed a new project, the Aynsley Dunbar Retaliation Reborn. It wasn't about fame, it was about reclaiming identity. He played blues again, the sound that raised him before the noise of fame swallowed everything. He played raw, imperfect, human. No click tracks, no playback screens, just hands and heart. On stage, audiences noticed something strange. Between songs he'd stare upward, almost as if listening to someone who wasn't there. Those who knew his story understood, he was still talking to his son. Every roll, every cymbal wash, a conversation across worlds. Then came 2007, a new storm. Health scares, exhaustion, the touring grind that never really ended. Doctors warned him to rest. He smiled and said, "I've been resting for 20 years. The old fire flickered again, this time gentler but steady. When asked why he kept touring, he answered, "Because every night I play, something broken in me gets tuned a little closer to right." The industry started remembering. Drummers half his age called him the Oracle. He'd sit backstage with kids who idolized Neil Peart and tell them, "Technique is what you show off. Timing is what saves your life." By 2017, the circle closed. Journey was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He stood on that stage, silver-haired, quiet, a half-smile hiding a lifetime of ghosts. Reporters wanted wild quotes, revenge stories. He just said, "I'm grateful the beat went on." No bitterness. No nostalgia. Just peace, the rarest trophy a rock musician ever wins. These days, people describe him as mysterious, almost monk-like. He lives near the Bay Area, still teaching, still practicing. The studio walls are covered with old symbols, framed photos, and one small picture of a boy with a toy drum. Below it, in black marker, it keep the time. Sometimes, during interviews, when talk turns to fame, he laughs softly. Fame's just a rhythm you can't keep forever. But peace keeps you. Aynsley Dunbar never became the household name that Hendrix or Bowie did. He became something rarer, the invisible pulse behind their glory, the living reminder that genius isn't loud, it's consistent. His hands tremble slightly now, but when he counts in 1, 2, 3, 4, the room still bends around him. Every scar, every loss, every backstage argument folds into that moment where the stakes rise and the world goes silent, waiting for him to decide when it begins. He always gives the same answer. He breathes once, nods, and lets the rhythm go. Because after everything, the fame, the fights, the funerals, the beat still belongs to him. In the end, Aynsley Dunbar never won the rock race by Hollywood's rules. He never became the face on the poster. He became the pulse, the part without which the poster wouldn't live. That's the irony of his career. Half the world has heard him. Almost no one knows it's him. His on Bowie. His on Lou Reed. His on Journey. His on Zapper. His on records people still call iconic, while the drummer who held it all together sits quietly in California, fixing the lugs on a kid's snare. And he's fine with that. But listen closely and you'll hear another layer, the one musicians whisper about. Aynsley was too good to be controlled. That's why he drifted. That's why he was always almost Hendrix. Almost a permanent mother. Almost a lifelong member of Journey. Almost the first name people mention. Producers loved his precision but feared his will. He changed parts on the fly, pushed singers forward, played fills that made guitarists look flat. In an industry built on egos, a drummer who acts like a soloist is a problem. One engineer from the 80s said it plainly. You didn't hire Aynsley to stay in the background. You hired him to remind everyone what music feels like when it's alive, and some people hated that. So yes, he carried a reputation. Difficult. Fiery. Uncompromising. But that's what made him what he was, a legend for those who know. There's another rumor musicians still tell, too poetic to verify. They say that in later years, when he rarely toured long-term, he'd sometimes show up at small club shows incognito. He'd sit in the dark corner, listening. If the drummer played by numbers, he left. If someone hit the cymbal with pain, with a story, he stayed until the end, walked over and said only one line. Keep time. Don't let labels steal it. For a young drummer, hearing that from a man who'd played with Zapper and Bowie was like a blessing from a shaman. But he never turned it into content. No motivational videos. No how to drum like a legend courses. He belonged to the old school. Music isn't what you post, it's what you survive. Something strange happened near the end. While the internet generation argued about who was the greatest drummer of all time, a young commenter started to notice. Wait, was that Aynsley on Diamond Dogs? Hold up, that Journey groove, that's him too? Why did nobody tell us this guy existed? Because that's how rock history works. First, everyone worships the frontman. Then the guitarist. Then the songwriter. And only later, when you've played in a band yourself, you start to hear the drums. And when you finally hear the drums, you inevitably find Aynsley Dunbar. His legacy isn't one album or one band. It's the idea he carried through 60 years of music. A drummer is not a metronome. A drummer is the conscience of the band. If the drummer has a conscience, the band never fully sells out. If the drummer has pain, the song won't be empty. If the drummer has a story, even a pop track will sound like it's been lived. That's what Aynsley brought to everyone he played with. Zapper, danger. Bowie, muscle. Journey, character. To himself, peace. In the end, he reached a place few rock musicians ever reach. He was not bitter. Not angry at the industry. Not broken by not being a first line. Not addicted to reunion nostalgia. He outlived fame. He outlived failure. He outlived his son. He outlived the version of himself from London who mistook tempo for freedom. And in old age he said something monks usually say, not drummers. I don't need to be remembered by everyone. I just don't want to be forgotten by the beat. So if you ever hear a 70s live recording where the drums sound not polished but furious. If you notice a rock song suddenly flexing with jazzy freedom. If you feel the drummer arguing with fate instead of just keeping time, check the credits. Sometimes it's him. Sometimes he isn't even listed. Sometimes it's a take recorded at 3 a.m. after everyone went home and the producer said, Aynsley, just give me one angry parse. And he did. Music, fade out, sticks laid gently on snare. In the end, the story of Aynsley Dunbar isn't he was famous and disappeared. It's the story of a man who could have been the face of rock, but chose to be its heartbeat. He lost the coin toss and never turned bitter. He got fired and never lost character. He buried his child and never quit music. He survived Zapper without losing his mind. He survived Bowie without losing himself. And maybe that's the quiet, unglamorous kind of rock and roll sainthood. You keep hitting the drums, even when there's no one left to clap.